if you're a startup, don't beat yourself up. Realize it's going to take longer than you want it to take, but stay the course. I would say consistency and steadiness is what wins the race, just like the hare and the tortoise. And then have a filter and make sure you don't get distracted. And everything should be held up against the lens of your core values, what your business stands for, and what you believe you need to do to proceed.
Hey there, I'm Cody McGuffie. I'm a husband, dad of 3, and I've been a founder of EverBee.
EverBee.
Where we serve over 1 million creators across the globe, helping them grow thriving online businesses. I believe every single human is a creator, and I believe every single creator should own a business. A business that gives them the freedom to build the life that they dream of. Built Online is where creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders get real insights, real stories, and the edge to build something that actually lasts. This is where the next generation of builders get built. Jimmy, how you doing?
Good, Cody. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on and sharing your time and knowledge with us. We're looking forward to this. As we kind of kick in, I wanted to just kind of hear a little bit about your story. And so I want to kind of phrase this with a question of, before you were a leader at Thrive Agency, what did Jimmy's life look like before that? What were you doing and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, Cody, I'm going to wind the clock way back to when I was 4 years old. This is going to be a little bit of a weird intro, but I'll connect the dots here. I was looking through a box a couple of years ago and I found a membership card to Merlin's Mail Order Magic Club when I was 4 years old. And I was fascinated with sleight of hand and being a magician. And I just, everybody else was going to soccer camp and craft camp. I was going to magic camp on Long Island, same camp that David Blaine went to, and started doing shows. And in high school, there's kind of behind the scenes that people don't know about. There's publications and trade publications and clubs. And so I would go to these clubs and there was a guy in the club that said, hey, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I work at an ad agency and we have a client that I would like to introduce you to, and maybe you could connect with them and do some shows. And so throughout high school, I was hired by this pretty large company that everybody's heard of. And I did promotional shows for them. And I got to go down to the ad agency, which is what they were called, back in the Mad Men days, and was fascinated with communicating a message. And I thought, wow, if I had to pick a career to go into, it would be something related to marketing or changing behavior, or, it's kind of the same as a magic trick, right? And so that's what I studied. And then I came out of school and started working at traditional ad agencies and started as a graphic designer. And I kept asking the owners, like, why are we doing this? And they're like, oh my gosh, Jimmy's got another question. And so they're like, why don't you go talk to the client? And so I would just ask the client, like, what is your goal? Why are we doing this? What is this brochure about? What is this ad about? And so I sort of worked my way up to creative director. And I was working at a pretty large agency, 82 offices internationally and 32 domestically, Omnicom Group. And the general manager of that group just said, I'm kind of done. And everybody was looking at each other going, okay, what do we do? And so I sort of threw my hat in the ring and said, hey, I'd like to run the agency. And so I was the general manager as well as the creative director, which gave me the opportunity to put on a tie and go meet with a client and figure out what they wanted to do, and then take off my tie and go back and, create the campaign or the vision or whatever needed to happen. And so I thought that gave me a unique perspective on creative is not just for creative sake. It's a client is hiring you to move the needle in some way. And so I've worked at a couple of different agencies. I had an in-house stint for a while, but I'm just fascinated with data. I'm fascinated with personality. I'm fascinated with behavior change related to a brand communicating a message. And Thrive is a wonderful organization that I've been with for about 5 years and able to do that for a large number of clients. So there's the brief history of Jimmy.
No, I appreciate that. And when for someone that isn't familiar with advertising, just as an industry, and you've been in advertising your entire career, what are like the core pillars in the advertising world? Because when I think about advertising, which I'm not a career advertiser, so I don't really know exactly all those pillars.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a couple buzzwords in there that are interesting probably for certain people. Like, what does creative mean? Like, practically in the world, is that the billboard that we see, or is this the Facebook ad that we scroll through? And then you have, and when you say you're meeting with clients, like what in the past, what kind of clients were you actually meeting with? Are we talking like big, huge corporate clients? Or are we talking about like the small business owner who has an online business, who is trying to, get their first $1 million in a year? Like, give us that kind of understanding, go a little deeper on what you're talking about there.
Yeah. So I would say it's all of that and everything in between. So a traditional ad agency, and believe it or not, Cody, the internet didn't exist at some point in history, and that's when I started my career. And so everything was very hands-on. If you were creating a layout, you were actually having galley proofs printed out on a typesetting machine, and you were waxing them down, and a photograph was taken, and you had to take a picture. And so it was quite an involved process. So there was typically a sales team, an account management team that owned that relationship. And I would say a lot of digital agencies follow this model. It came out of that. You had the creative department where all the folks dressed really cool and talked really cool. And so they would actually conceptualize what the client needed. And then the account manager, the salesperson, would verify on behalf of the client that that's what the client was asking for. And so, yeah, I would say it's similar to the way things are set up now in bringing something to life. And so back then, creative was 3 networks, traditional newspaper and, brochures, a lot of direct mail. There may be, a variety of traditional types of marketing. Now that has taken the place, or digital has taken the place of that. I mean, there still are those traditional methods. And, when we work with clients, we try to bridge those two if they're still using those, which can be very effective. But yeah, I was meeting with all of the types of people. We would have local clients that would be mom and pop organizations that were just trying to serve the local community. But then I would also go into Reynolds Metals Corporation, which was purchased by Alcoa. And so Reynolds Metal, as we probably all have used Reynolds Wrap and Saran Wrap and some of those types of things. We had a packaging division where we actually designed the boxes. There were trade ads for distribution that needed to happen. We were designing annual reports, which typically was the marketing piece for a publicly traded company. And so big budgets, photo shoots, that type of thing. And then the internet started to happen, and people were like, oh, this isn't going to last. Of course, the speeds were not there. You couldn't do whatever you wanted. But I sort of raised my hand. And there was quite a division at that point, which I think is similar to the division that we're having now with AI, where people in the industry could either adopt the computer or they could reject the computer. And the ones that adopted the computer were able to reinvent themselves. And I just sort of raised my hand and I said, I'll be the director of web development. And they were like, okay, sure, Jimmy, whatever. And so we would start to build websites and then start to transition that printed matter into a digital format. And some of the principles that we have related to an online experience come from those days. I mean, you've heard about top of fold or above the fold. Where does that come from? That comes from the newspaper industry. And so when the newspaper is folded in half and put in a box where you put your quarter in, whatever shows up top of fold is the most important, right? Those are the top headlines. And so when you structure a website, maybe people don't know that's where that term came from, and you need to be aware of top of fold or above the fold. So yeah, I would say I was fortunate enough to be in organizations that had a broad mix of pretty big clients and pretty small clients, and you had to be able to adapt and to understand who's your audience, who's the stakeholder. Is it the business owner or is it the marketing director who's hired you? And yeah, I would say that's what I love about the industry, and that's why I've stayed in it.
I love it. How about now? Who are you guys focusing on now? Who's Thrive serve at the moment? Small, big, corporate?
So Thrive started, interestingly, by Matt Bowman. He started as a web development company by himself. And then he suddenly realized that website needs traffic. And so got very interested in how do you drive traffic to a website. And so over the last 20 years, we have been on the Inc. 5,000 list 7 times consecutively. We are full service. We have about 175 employees. We focus mainly on the US market. But the decision was made early on to not specialize in any particular vertical or industry. And so we still work with the mom and pop because our heart is helping people navigate the internet. And then we also work with some pretty large franchise, multi-location enterprise companies. And we've divided our team up to be able to address the needs of that breadth. We lose business sometimes to people who specialize in one particular area because they want to know that that person or that organization only does that. But we felt that we can last longer, we can be more strategic if we look at the drive-through, right? Where did the drive-through restaurant came from? It came from the banking industry. So if we're able to use strategies and tactics from one industry to another, we just feel that gives us a competitive advantage, the ability to be agnostic related to client base. And so, yeah, again, and we get to solve problems in a variety of ways.
So in that case, that a lot of this audience listening to this today, they are first time, second time entrepreneurs building their business, first or second business that they've ever started. They probably have a product, they have a niche they're targeting, and they're trying to get their first $100,000 a year, right? So really kind of learning how to crawl, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
You guys probably, seems to me that y'all focus a little bit further past them. I would imagine so, right? Like
No,
you
we
kind
work with
of,
startups and help them with exactly what you're talking about.
oh, let's talk about that a little bit then, because I think there's a segment of 80% of folks that are listening to this are probably trying to go from 0 to 1, and then you
Yep.
have the 20% are trying to go from like 1 to 2 to 3. So maybe we can focus first on the 80%, which is going from a startup 0 to 1. What kind of problems do you primarily deal with there at Thrive, and what can you kind of speak to about that?
Yeah. So a lot of folks won't work with startups because of some key things that happen when you're in that phase. Um, I would say if I had to make a blanket statement is we are energized by startups who are very excited about the possibilities. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is launching a brand and getting it off the ground is painfully hard for everybody involved. And I would say it's changed over the last few years just because a lot of the social platforms that typically were interpreted as free exposure are now publicly traded, and they have to meet revenue goals, and they're very ad focused. And so organic reach has dropped considerably. And it's hard for us to talk to that business owner and say, you've got to put a little skin in the game to make this work and to get this flywheel moving. And so I would say from 0 to the first 100,000 to the first million is typically harder, much harder than the first million to the first, the next million, because of all of that momentum and inertia that needs to happen. And one of the things that we see is there's a lot of choices out there, and you can't spread yourself too thin. A lot of the folks are either working by themselves or they're working with a couple of people, and they're trying to be very grassroots. And you have to be very clear about who you are, what you offer, and how you want to communicate that, because your product or service may not be very well communicated in written form. It needs to be demonstrated through video or photography. You should have opinions about things. And so I always like to use this 5-finger analogy, which is something you carry with you all the time. And it's a good reminder to stay focused. And so if I hold up my hand, the pinky is that pinky promise that we all did as little kids. And so what promise are you making to your clients that you have now and prospects that you may have in the future? What are you promising that you're going to deliver? You got to be clear on that. The next one is the ring finger. And so in the US, I know it's a little bit different internationally, but that's where you keep your wedding band. And so a lot of people say, well, that's a promise too. I'm celebrating my 20th wedding anniversary this week, so it's top of mind. My parents, their 65th wedding anniversary is tomorrow, which is crazy to think about. But what is the passion that you're bringing to that? How can you exude that passion in communicating your message? People want to know that you're passionate. It's infectious, right? Anytime you see somebody that's excited, they're passionate about something. I know you're getting a little worried because we're moving on to the middle finger here. The middle finger is not something vulgar. It's actually defiance, right? And so, what is the defiance that you're bringing against the villain? So, in the weight loss industry, maybe it's a fad diet. In I know you work with a lot of folks who have Etsy stores and they're handcrafted items. And so, is their villain an ideology of mass market produced things that are not handmade? And so, what are you basically sticking your middle finger up at to say, we're not going to put up with this anymore? Because you need to have a point of view, you need to have an opinion. The
Hmm.
next one is probably the toughest, which is the pointy finger, which can signify number one, or it can signify a direction that you're going. And so if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to spend a lot of money and you're going to end up somewhere where you don't want to be. And that's involved in the strategy. But also, we always like to say, for any page on the website or any communication that you're having, you should have one audience, one promise, one call to action, and one benefit that the client or prospect is going to get. And so that number one is a reminder. And then the next one is the thumbs up, which is the measurement. Are you doing a thumbs up? Or are you doing a thumbs down? How often are you checking in? And are you getting closer to your goal, or are you getting further away from your goal? I had someone tell me one time, there's all sorts of things that when you look at changing something in your business that you can just kind of get paralyzed. But pick one thing and make a move. And was it better or was it worse? And if you can just use that as a filter, then a lot of times that just calms yourself down and you're able to move and shift. So I would say, if you're a startup, um, don't beat yourself up. Realize it's going to take longer than you want it to take, but stay the course. I would say consistency and steadiness is what wins the race, just like the hare and the tortoise. And then be very, have a filter and make sure you don't get distracted. And everything should be held up against the lens of your core values, what your
Hmm.
business stands for, and what you believe you need to do to proceed. And I'll just finish on one thing. There's the left brain and the right brain. So the left brain is the data and the research that shows you this is likely the best path to go. And then the other is the right brain, which is that emotional feel good thing that you need to be connecting with your audience and sharing. So,
So what I'm hearing you too, I took a lot of notes here while you were talking.
yeah,
The five finger approach is, just to repeat it back, is ring finger is the pinky promise, right? What's the one promise you're making to
yeah,
your audience? Second is passion. Your ring finger is your passion. So this is something that I'm assuming that this is like, I'm trying to understand what you mean by passion here, and how do you get that onto a landing page? Is it just expressing, with passion that, we're the best at what we do, or this is what we do and this is how we do it differently? Or what do you mean by passion? How does that translate to a word?
yeah. So I mentioned Etsy before. Maybe you sell ceramic mugs,
Mm,
and you remember that your grandmother had this blue ceramic mug when you were growing up. It had a little chip in it, and you thought, wow, it's kind of imperfect, but grandma drinks out of that mug every single day. And you sat with her and had your little hot chocolate while she had her coffee. And those memories have infused the way that you go about crafting a mug that someone's going to buy. That could be
mm,
something you give to your grandmother, give to your mother for Mother's Day, give to your sister. And people love that sort of connection. And it's a story that other people can tell other people. And so when they see that mug, they go, "Hey, where did you get that mug?" "Oh, you're not going to believe it. I got this from this woman who, da 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 da. This is her grandmother's story. There might be a picture of your grandmother." And so
mm,
passion doesn't have to be that, partner sexual passion. It can be just that warm heart, fuzzy thing that gets you up every day to do what you
mm.
do. And
Okay.
yeah, I would say it can be different for everybody.
And so then the next one would be villain. And I know you mentioned kind of the anti-mass market if you're a handcrafting person.
Yeah.
What if you are a brand owner who sells t-shirts and apparel to pet owners, right? To dog and cat owners? Who would the villain be in that case? Who could it be for them?
Yeah. So interesting you would say that. My wife and I don't have any kids, but we have two little fur babies. And so for Father's Day, she purchased a t shirt for me that had little cartoons of our 2 dogs, and they were customized with the message. And so for Mother's Day, what did I buy? I sent in a photo, and they transferred those 2 faces of our June and Clark into embroidery that looked exactly like our pets. And so if that's what you believe is going to connect with your audience, then your villain is going to be just a cookie cutter approach to any dog, any message that is not personalized, because the ownership of a pet is a personal thing. They're treated like kids. And so that's just one example from my recent past, Mother's Day, Father's Day, that could be the villain against that. The other thing that it could be is any other option other than that t-shirt, right? So you know that that person loves these pets. Why would you get them a tie? Why would you get them um, a box of coffee? Anything other than a specific immediate competitor to what you're doing.
It's funny because originally I was thinking of way too extreme, I think, when it comes to villains, but you broke it down into a smaller
Yeah.
chunks. When I was thinking about the pet, for example, I was thinking, maybe maybe your villain should be like regular parents. When I say regular, meaning like kids, I'm
Yeah.
like, no, that's way too extreme. Well, it's crazy. But you're just like, no, it could just be the other options. The villains could be, what would you normally get your wife? Well, I'd get her some jewelry. Well, you don't want to get her jewelry, right? Because it doesn't have like something that she truly loves and cares about and thinks about every single day, which is her pet.
Yep.
And those being, is it typical for someone, when you look at a brand, should they have this 5-finger approach for the entire brand and it should be consistent across the brand? Or is this more page by page specific or product by product specific? Is it really, really needed to be consistent, congruent across the entire company? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I would say, and I love talking about branding, people always ask, what is the definition of a brand? And the best one that I've been able to come up with is the sum of all experiences that your customers or potential customers have with you. And so it's not just that story about the pets. It's not just the variety of colors that they come in. It's that plus that plus that plus that. And so I know Apple has been used as an example probably on every podcast out there. So maybe we'll tick that box. The transference between using an iPhone and buying a Macintosh computer to an iPad, the good feelings that you have about each one of those now compounds in an exponential way your propensity to buy one of the other things in the mix. Are you going to trust their AirPods over somebody else's headphones? So I would say the brand needs to have a personality. The brand needs to have a point of view, but then each product as an extension of that, which is different than Procter and Gamble. So Procter and Gamble, you probably don't know the parent company, but they have a variety of cleaning products that all have their own personality, right? And so they made the decision that each product is going to have its own personality. That's a very expensive way to market because you basically have to have a marketing budget for every single product. They're big enough, they can do that. For someone starting out that wants to have product expansion, I would say you want to have a personality to the brand, and then you want to infuse that personality in each product that you have. And, we see a lot of brands that have incongruent product extensions that you have a feeling about the brand, and then they come out with something else, and you're like, why are they getting involved in that? That doesn't make any sense to me. And so that can also cause a pause with your customer base.
I get that. And so I think about, I'm not actually, I know you know a little bit about EverBee, but not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I think about EverBee's brand, I guess you could say we're still baby, right? We're 4 years in. But we have like a little mini brand, I guess you could say, and it's growing. And I would say that I think a lot about this and really like, what are we selling? What are people buying when they like sign up for EverBee software? Are we selling software? Are we selling data analytics? Are we selling like a platform and infrastructure for e-commerce and websites and stuff? Yes, we are. But like really when people sign up to EverBee, I hope and I believe that they're signing up for the potential to improve their life, the potential to own their own business, the location freedom and time freedom and potential financial freedom, that comes along with having a successful business. Basically anti socialism, I guess you could say, probably, right? And not that we're a political brand, but it's more
Sure.
like we're heavily capitalistic, right? We believe in capitalism. And when someone signs up for us, I think this comes across, I hope this comes across, but I don't think it's been very intentional from me or from us as a company. And am I thinking about the things correctly in that sense? Is that kind of how someone should be thinking about their brand? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. Your inclination to say that it's always about the benefits. It's never about the features, right? So the fact that your software and your ability to get somebody the information that they need is the key that unlocks the door to that freedom, to that ability to decide, is this a side hustle? Is this a weekend thing that I'm going to do with my kids? Or is this going to be a transition from the 9 to 5 and allow me to work remotely wherever I want to go? And so being able to highlight what that means for each different market would be important. And so when we start to slice and dice EverBee and its benefit to the audience, you're probably going to pick out some avatars or some groups of people that want to sign on to the platform. And that conversation that you have with the person who wants that to make that a family project is much different than somebody who wants to travel the world and be a digital nomad selling information or selling whatever it is that they want to sell. Because the more closely that you can have the brand flip the switch in somebody's head that says, wow, they get me, they know exactly what my pains are and what my goals and ambitions are, that's when they start to stick to you like glue,
Mm.
or honey, as the EverBee sort of metaphor goes.
Mm.
And so I think that's where you start to be able to have this overall feeling of, freedom is your choice. Let our bees do the work behind the scenes. But if you're this person, let me have a conversation with you on this. If you're that person, let me have a
I
conversation with
see.
you. So,
Oh, I get that. Okay, very cool. Um, you mentioned this one thing I wanted to bring up and ask you about. You said if your message doesn't make people lean in, it's just noise. You remember saying that?
I do.
What do you mean
Go
by
ahead.
that?
So I talked about being a magician, and there's a structure to a magic trick, and we've all heard the term sitting on the edge of your seat. Well, what is that? That is that embodiment of leaning in. You're not looking at your watch. You're not figuring out your grocery list. You're not texting someone. You are committed to understanding what's coming next. And so if you're not eliciting curiosity in your audience, you've lost them. And it's just noise because they have too many things that are going to distract them from where they are and what they're doing. And so that physical act of leaning in is the fact that they want to know more.
Do you find that people and companies that come to you, or maybe just companies that you browse online, are missing the point here, are missing this more often than we probably even notice?
Yeah. So I'll tell you the biggest indicator of not having people lean in is talking about yourself instead of them. And I mean, Cody, what's the most attractive word that you can hear? It's your name. I just said it, Cody. Why? Because it's very egocentric. We all want to be loved and we all want to hear our name. But for me to sit back and tell you that we're a family run business and we've been in business for 20 years and that, like, nobody cares.
Mm.
They do after they learn more about you, but in that initial interaction, they want to know what's in it for them. And so the only way that you can get somebody to lean in is to ask them questions. Um, Tell them about how you've been able to solve their specific problem. Just like going back to the conversation about being a digital nomad, you could say something to the effect of, um, it's interesting that you want to be able to travel the world and do what you want on your terms, because that's exactly why I started this business. And I'm sitting right now in a cafe in um, Majorca, and I'm able to run my business. And so that person goes, what? You are? Like, let
Hmm.
me look in the background. That's very cool. And so that causes them to be curious and to lean in. Um, so yeah, does that help?
It does. It does help a lot. I think it's a good time. It's funny, we're already almost at time to go into rapid fire questions. You ready?
Oh, ready.
All right. What is your favorite business book you read?
Oh gosh. So there's, and I don't know if you call it a business book. There's a guy, Jeremy Cowart, who is a COWART, who's a photographer, but much more, he's a philanthropist. And he had a book that came out a couple of years ago called I'm Possible. And if you run it all together, it's impossible. And it's just an amazing book. You'll be very humbled when you read that book because the stuff that he's been able to do from a typical photographer mindset, and I think that would connect with your creative audience. Um, I'll go back and read it. I've probably read it 3 or 4 times, so that's a
I
fun
love
one
it.
for
I'm
me.
pulling it up right here. It's I'm Possible, a story of survival. Is it Richard White? Richard in not Richard White, you said?
No, it's Jeremy Cowart.
Jeremy
COW.
Covert. Okay.
Yeah, there might be another book called that.
Yeah, let me check it out. Let's see. That's why if anyone's
It's got kind
curious.
of a multicolored cover on it.
Oh, I see it here. Okay, I'm Possible. Yeah, Jeremy Covert. We will link to this book too in the description for anyone wondering. Jumping into fear, discovering a life of purpose. Very cool. Let's see. Next one. What's the one thing that you wish before, kind of maybe not starting your own business, but I think you have. You've started your own businesses too. But what's one thing that you think people should know before starting a business?
I think I mentioned it before. If you don't love it, you're going to hate it because you're going to put more blood, sweat, and tears than you ever thought possible. And um, just you have to be okay with that. And you have to commit to seeing it through.
Who do you think should be a business owner?
Wow. I think anybody should be a business owner, whether you want to be a business owner or not, and whether you decide to do it for a year or whether it sticks, because I think what it brings out in you is it causes you to dig deep and to figure out what you're really made of and what you
Mm,
care about, and helps you develop skills that if you decide it's not right for you, you can bring into an organization. You hear this a lot. I would say there's probably no business on the planet Earth that would not be excited to know that you went out and have an entrepreneurial mindset, because that's what they want. They want people who take their role seriously and treat that business as if it were their own.
mm. I completely agree. I think about this. Some of the best people on our team in this company and previous companies, they typically tried something on their own.
Hmm.
Maybe it wasn't even, maybe they didn't mean for it to be a business, but they had the initiative to go and start something from scratch or build something that do something that's really, really hard. The odds were completely against them. And those people thrive at companies. So whether you stick with your own business or you decide to go and contribute to another business, it serves you all around. I
Oh
completely
yeah.
agree with this. I would argue too that it makes you a better human when you at least try to own your own business, even if it's a side business. It makes you typically a better husband, partner. Makes you a better father if you're a parent, um, because you realize that you're not always right, and you figure out how to communicate properly, and you make mistakes, and you have to figure out how to say sorry, and it's a very interesting thing. It's you learn a lot about yourself when you own a business.
Yeah. You're hitting on all the points that I would totally agree with.
Jimmy, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience with us. Where can people find you and follow you and connect with you further?
Yeah. So I made a commitment at the beginning of the year to put a video on LinkedIn every day, Monday through Friday. I actually have been leading into the weekends. So go there. I have different tips related to marketing and life. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to chat with anybody over DMs or schedule a call with me if you're just wondering, should you do this thing? And then Thrive Agency, just like it sounds. Got a great website. We've got some resources on there that you can read for free. And if you feel like we can help you, would love to be able to chat with anybody who is thinking about getting some extra help.
Beautiful. And that's thriveagency.com. We'll link to that in the show notes and description. And also LinkedIn is Jimi Gibson. It's Jimi Gibson, Gibson. We'll link to that also. Jimmy, thank you for the time again.
Great. Love to hang with you again, Cody. Thanks.
Talk to you soon.